So, hello. Yes, thank you. So, yes, I'm Aaron. I'm another Aaron. I'm another actor. So, you might be thinking I look exactly like the last person, but there is one crucial difference, which, if you notice, we have two letters in our name that are repeated, but in his, it were two R's, and in mine, there are two A's. So, very different, completely different people. Yes, I'm Aaron. I'm a senior education specialist at Kentico Content. If I'd given this speech yesterday, I would have told you I'm at Kentico Cloud, but we went through a major rebranding yesterday. So first of all, I'd like to give a shout out back in offices in Brno to Zlatan and Martina, who went through everything and made sure it was all working. Our portal was working at our new URLs, so that let me be here and concentrate on this and let everybody else on the team go on vacation, so they had fun as well. Yes, Kentico is a content management company, and we're based in the best city in the Czech Republic, which is, of course, Brno, which is 2 hours to the southeast of here. Yes, so why am I here today? I would like to start with the question of why do we document things? Now, I think different people have different reasons why they document different kinds of things. Personally, my favorite two are one, to support my family, and two, because I really enjoy the feeling of finding the perfect word or the perfect way to express things, and it's a great feeling when you can put it on the page and it feels great. But I would say the reason that documentation exists is not just because of me and my feelings. This is a vague definition that I just came up with, but at Kentico, the technical writers and the documentarians are a part of the customer education team, which is a part of customer success. So I would say that the reason that the documentation exists at all, the reason that I have a job, is we're trying to help people understand how to achieve their goals, in our case with our specific tool, with our specific content management service. So we wouldn't exist if it weren't for the people who are going to read it. What we're doing is trying to take something that we probably know a lot about, or at least we work with people who know a lot about our tool, and we try to translate that into the language that other people know so that they can do what they want to do. But the important thing to understand this is if we're trying to help people, we need to understand those people. As I mentioned, I'm a senior education specialist. My background is in education. So this is why I focus on it in this way. And I would say that the most important thing is to understand what other people's goals are, what they want to achieve, and how they would go about describing that kind of thing. Because even finding the perfect word in my context doesn't necessarily mean that you, in your context, when you are reading it, are going to understand it in the same way. You might understand it from a different point of view. You might have different terminology. You might be thinking about something in a different kind of way. So in order to really communicate that message, in order to translate that, whether that's about software or biogenetics, as we heard about yesterday, there's a certain terminology, a certain context that exists in. You really have to understand the other person, or as Atticus Finch says, you have to climb into their skin and walk around in it. So I'm going to go through a way, which is part of our efforts to try to understand the people that we're writing for, which is to improve our documentation. So other people are successful, they keep using our product, they feel good, we feel good, everybody goes home happy. To start with, I just want to go through the situation that we were in before we started this kind of process. At the time, our common daily work, we weren't in the situation like we were hearing about yesterday. We passed through the initial startup phase, and we had most of the things had some sort of documentation. It's not perfect, but we have something describing most of the features that are necessary. We have an API reference for our API and so on. We spent our time tracking changes, updating things for new changes, adding in new features, but they're all based around things that we already know. And most of our input is from developers, people who know our product really well. We're kind of maintaining knowns, or perhaps, as I would say after yesterday, we're turning what we are known unknowns, we're turning them into known knowns and putting them out into the sunlight for other people to understand as well. So our known knowns become your known knowns, and we can work on that together. What we didn't do a lot of, we really like getting feedback from our users, but I think outside of the people in this room and maybe anybody who would be watching it, there's not a lot of people who really read documentation and think, wow, that was great, I need to give feedback, or here, let me tell you how you can improve your documentation. There's not a lot of direct contact that we have with our users. We would like more, and we're doing things to try to get more feedback, but there's not a lot that we have to work with. We have this base, so we don't re-go through everything that we have to try to relearn things or to try to rework things to be better, unless we have a reason to it. And we don't work with our product outside of our own context. We recently moved all of our documentation into our own content management system. So we do work with the product, but for one, we know a lot about how it's supposed to work. We know what to expect and how it works, and that helps us do that. And other people use our tool for a variety of different kinds of things, and we don't know exactly, or we didn't especially, know exactly what kinds of things they were doing, what they're trying to achieve from it. We didn't do a lot of work with other perspectives. I would say this is a lot of unknown unknowns, things that are out there somewhere, we don't know what they are, and we don't know how exactly to implement them. So what did we do? We took something that I would call is user experience mapping, and we tried to implement that. It comes from UX, which, as you learned yesterday, we're all designers, so it's important for us to take that kind of design principles and apply them to what we are doing. Customer journey mapping is especially focused on describing how people evaluate tools and choose to use a tool and then become a customer of a specific company. But in this example, I'm using user experience, which is maybe their experience with a certain service within the overall product. In our case, that's the documentation, how they interact with that service, with our documentation. I would say there's some people who argue a lot about the difference between a journey and experience map. If you're interested, you can read more about that, but I'm not actually going to touch on that, even though I do enjoy a good terminology fight. But in this kind of map, you really want to focus on the touch points, on when people interact with the specific parts of our documentation, what they're trying to achieve when they come to the documentation, why do they go there looking for help, or whatever. And did that given touch point help them do what they wanted to do? When they came there, did they leave with a feeling of success? Are they going to go home and say, wow, Kentico content was great, I got to know what I could do, and I'm going to keep working with it and be happy about that? Or are they going to go home and really complain about it and not be happy because they didn't do what they wanted to do? But it's important to include the entire experience. You have to know what people were feeling before they started with your documentation and how they continue outside of it. Because, again, it's about understanding somebody else's context. Not just your own context, not just your own documentation, but where they are coming from, and also how each interaction made them feel, what their experience of that interaction was. As we saw yesterday with the error handling, the error messages, the context of their feelings can really affect how they receive the message. If they're feeling really frustrated, a different kind of message will come across. We saw that yesterday, and that's true with other kinds of documentation as well. So it's important to think about that. So I'd just like to go through a couple of examples of experience maps that come from more professional people at this kind of thing. The first one originally came from Lego, and I got it by way of Bruce Temkin. This is an experience of a journey by an executive from London to New York, a plane ride from London to New York. And you can see it goes around in a circle, and it's divided into time. There's before you arrive at the airport in London, there's the flight, and there's getting to New York. Are you met by a taxi? Are you met by someone with a sign with your name on it? Do you feel good about that? And so on. And at each point around the map, each experience is divided based on different things. Perhaps it's saying, do I feel good about this or not good about this? Or perhaps it's saying, this is a really key point where if we invest resources here, people will come away with something feeling really good about it. Or perhaps it's saying, this is a place where we don't have enough information. We need to do more research to know why, what happens at this point, how we can improve it, how people feel, and so on. This is a way to think about an experience. Just to show you, maps can have different forms. Here's another one. This is from IKEA, and this is a map of an experience at an actual IKEA store, not like online, but you go to the store, you park your car. Maybe you don't like the car park for some reason. You walk around. Some people get a little overwhelmed by the round layout of an IKEA space. I know I do. That was where I would drop out. But then if you're trying the IKEA products, maybe you start to feel better. You say, oh, that's a really nice bed, that's a really nice bookshelf, and so on. So those seem like really positive experiences. But you can also see that perhaps one of those experiences might not be so positive. That particular product might not be good, in which case the person might drop out of this experience. They leave it, they don't buy anything, they go home unhappy, and so on. But perhaps they continue in this, they find the actual thing, they do other things, they come and they have to pay for the thing, they have to arrange for someone to drive it to their house, they have to arrange for delivery, they have to arrange for installation, and it's a lot of little details at the end where they don't really feel happy. They have to work out these things, so that's where, boom, you get hit with some ice cream, some other kind of treat, maybe a Swedish meatball, something like that. You leave with a positive feeling. You leave feeling like that was a nice place to shop. I mean, because I know in education, you see this with lessons as well. The experiences you have at the beginning and at the end are often the ones you go away with and you remember those the most strongly, especially if they're really positive experiences like getting to eat some ice cream. So what did we do? We did this a year ago. This is my second Write the Docs, and so we did this after the last time I was at Write the Docs. I went home, like I hope all of you will today or tomorrow, whenever you get home. I went home feeling excited and inspired and full of energy, and I wanted to try out some new things. So we had the opportunity, we had a day-long meeting where we all joined together and tried out some new things. So this is one of the things that we tried. So I thought I was inspired, so I hope you'll find some inspiration too. And we went through 4 basic steps in order to do this kind of map, to create that kind of map for our own documentation. First, we figured out information about our documentation. We did that before we met, mostly. We created personas, we went through each journey and mapped it out, and then we learned stuff and we tried to act on those insights. And I'll try to show you what we did, so hopefully you'll learn through that example. So the first thing is about gathering information. As I mentioned, we don't have a lot of direct feedback. We don't have a lot of people who are telling us exactly what they want from our documentation and so on. Sometimes we have internal feedback, but not a lot of external feedback. So we did get lots of help from our wonderful UX team. They did other kinds of research and interviews, compiling it. They were focused on the overall customer journey, why people choose Kentico content for their own reasons and so on. But we could use a lot of that information, adapt it to our context, and learn a lot about our users that way. We also have other sources. We use things like analytics, what pages people were viewing, how they interacted, where they're clicking, and so on. And also sequence of clicks, like if they come to one place, what do they do next, and so on. These kinds of things can give you an idea of how people go through their journey, their experience of your documentation. Also look at support tickets, what people are asking for, what they're really interested in, and our marketing and sales team do research and talk with people. We have customer success managers. There are people inside our company who work with people, and we can talk with them and gather information. But after that, we have a lot of information. We have a lot of things all at once, and it's hard to work with everything at once. So what we did is create personas. Personas are another concept that come from UX. They're representations of your users. You categorize people based on similar goals, similar behavior, similar characteristics. They're groups of people, kind of aggregated data that you put into categories to better work with them. And you give each persona a name and a face to help them seem more human. You're not just talking about our users out there, but you're talking about one specific person who acts in a certain way, so that you can really have some empathy with that person, with that group of people, and try to understand better what they are trying to achieve. This is an example from what I wrote on the board during our meeting. So if you can't read it, you're not the only person. You can see we have faces for each people, we have names for each people, and we have some characteristics of the people, what their job title is, what kinds of things they're trying to achieve, what kinds of things they like and don't like, what previous knowledge they might have when they come to our organization, what kinds of things we know about them, their desires, and so on. These are just some examples. I don't think the details are important, but this is the kind of thing that you would look at in order to understand your users better. We actually came up with 6 different personas. We do content management, and we offer content as a service, which means we have lots of different people using our service. We have technical people who are building websites. We have non-technical people who have never seen a line of code in their lives and really don't want to. We have people who work on a project overall and people who work on little parts of the project, and they're all coming to one place to trying to find help for those different kinds of things. So these are the people that we came up with, and you can see each of them has a smiley face, so we can feel positive about those people, and they have a name so that we know who it is we're talking about. So first we could look at an example. We could look at Esmeralda here. Esmeralda, she's a technical person. She's a developer who was invited to the project. That means she did not choose to work with our product. She wants to achieve things, but she wants to achieve things really easily. What she wants is to come to our documentation, take some code, paste it into her application, and move on to some other tool. She doesn't really care about us at all. We have some nice tutorials and stuff explaining concepts, how to work with our tool, but she doesn't really care about that as a general principle. She wants support for what she wants to do, and she doesn't really want to see anything else. If we have a really comprehensive, nice layout, that might even be a drawback for her in a way. I mean, this is the general concept we have for this kind of person. And so what we did is we created a map for Esmeralda. This is, again, my scribbling on the wall on the day of. And I don't know if you can see it. It was just supposed to be an example. You'll see maybe better. There's a sad face on the bottom left and a happy face on the top. And it's a timeline, and in each place we write what she's doing, and how she's feeling is about how high or low she is on the graph. Yes, and here we're starting way before she comes to our documentation. Our documentation here, the first thing she does with our documentation is where it's circled. So we distinguish between normal actions she's taking outside. Here she's just invited to the project. She looks around, she doesn't really like it, she doesn't really care, and she moves on. And then only a few steps later does she come to our reference. Now, I would say at this point, even with the information you have, the map that you make is not going to be true for everybody who might fit this characteristic. When we met and we talked about it, what we're doing is going through a possible scenario for what people might do that will give us insights. So it's not, we had some arguments, would she really do this, would she not? And it's important to just make a decision and map something, and then you can come back to it later, make a different map for a different kind of person. For example, in some cases, she might do 2 things and get so frustrated she leaves, but then we don't learn anything, so that's not an important map for us. But afterwards, we took these scribblings and translated them into this, which is, again, lots of detail. You don't necessarily have to know, but the blue points are where she interacts with our documentation, and the white points are where she's doing other kinds of things. And you can see overall, I mean, she's not most of the time really having such a great experience, but there are some times when she's a little bit happy, which is nice. But we can look at what kinds of things we learned looking at her experience. For one, as I mentioned, she's unhappy before she gets to us. She doesn't want to look for help. She doesn't really want to learn new technologies, new things. She's interested in doing things and not really learning things. So she's unhappy before she gets to us. And as I said, we have these starter tutorials that are supposed to help you get up to speed, get you onboarded with the concepts, but she's not interested in that. She wants to achieve a specific task and not learn about the thing. We also see that every page can be the first page. She doesn't go to our introductory page. She searches for a specific thing to answer her specific problem. So there's a good book on this that you probably know by Mark Baker, I think, that every page is page 1. But we saw in this example that she came to a different page, and we weren't really prepared on that page for that page to be page 1. We weren't prepared for that to be her first experience with the documentation. For example, we have SDKs to help build something with the application, but in this page where there were examples, the examples were based on the SDKs, but we didn't there mention where to get the SDKs, that we're using SDKs and so on. So it might be confusing for her to see this syntax that won't work unless she downloads a specific package that she doesn't know where it is. And we also have a nice ability in the documentation to try out the API. And there's even a button where you can enter the parameters and you push the button, but it really wasn't visible. There were, I think, 5 of us in the room, and we all knew the button was there, but none of us really saw it, because it was the same color as the background, it looked exactly the same, and it really wasn't visible. And that's why I think it's important, the points that are white here, that are not the documentation, we just talked about that abstractly, but when she came to the documentation, we actually clicked through things and looked at the pages and tried to look at them with a fresh eye from her perspective, so that we could see things like not seeing the try it button. And just quickly, there's another developer persona we had who is Luke. Luke is similar in a sense in that he's a technical person, but he's the lead developer of the project, which means he decides whether to use the tool, and he is the one who makes the decision, and he's more interested in learning about concepts and so on. So just as a contrast, some things we learned, he came to our reference, and the first thing we had was a table describing all of our APIs, and just briefly describing all of the APIs, and it didn't look pretty. I mean, the first thing you see is tabular information. It seems a little intimidating, perhaps, at first, and it really wasn't necessary for the kind of information that we were presenting. The first example that we had, we were trying to describe some really complex and interesting things like filtering and ordering and everything like that, but that's really hard when it's your first example. The first thing that you see is probably you're going to want it to be simple, so it's easy to understand. And this was trying to explain 6 different concepts at one time, which is, not ideal. And when we wrote the example, we were like, wow, we get to explain all of these nice concepts in one example, which is nice, but then when you come to it with new eyes as a different kind of person, it can be overwhelming. And again, we saw that the try it button was not visible. We also saw he left the documentation for a while, and then he had a different problem, but he's using different kind of terminology than what we have. We're trying in our documentation to use the same terms we have in the product, because consistent experience is a nice thing, but if he's coming from a different context, he might have synonyms and things like that, where if he's doing a search, especially with the limited search we had at the time, if he's doing that kind of search, he's not going to come across the documentation we have that addresses his problems. And the last thing is, at the time, we had documentation in multiple locations. We had non-technical stuff in one place, technical stuff in another place. And there were reasons for that, and that addressed real concerns for us, but it really wasn't ideal from his perspective. So what did we do for Esmeralda and Luke? How did we try to address these things? What did we do to work on them? I mean, one thing is we just changed the color of the button, so now it was orange, so it really stands out from the white background. We removed the table, simplified that first example so that it's clear and basic from the very first beginning. Tried to make them more consistent. We've created tasks, which we haven't finished, but we're continually working on them to add in synonyms, improve our search, to use different kind of terminology so that people can find what they're looking for based on their own context. And we had this long-term project where we migrated all of our stuff, which we had on other people's tools. We were using third-party tools for documentation portals, and we migrated all of them into Kentico content so that we can use our own product, and there's other benefits. If you're interested, I can talk about it, but mainly it's in one place, and we have control over it, how it looks and how it works, and that's really positive for us. I'd just like very quickly to show just a small example. This is Casey. She's a non-technical person, so that you see that it can work for different kinds of people. And again, we can see that she does a lot. Especially for a non-technical person, she's clicking around inside of our user interface. She's not looking for API examples or anything. She does a lot before she sees the documentation. And the reason she comes to the documentation is she has a problem. She is feeling frustrated with something. She wants to achieve something, and she doesn't know how to achieve that. And she doesn't like asking for help. She wants to feel self-sufficient, like she can do whatever she would like. So she feels frustrated and unhappy before she gets to us. The starter tutorials we had at the time were very useful for starting to build applications, but not really for people who are just trying to manage content. They're too technical for her, and she couldn't really find what she needed. We also have articles that started negatively. They started with restrictions. You can't do this unless you have this set up. And especially since you're on the other side of me, she's unhappy before she gets to us, and then she sees something that she can't do. And that leads to this increased feeling that the documentation is not helpful, she's not being supported, she doesn't feel good, she's not leaving with a positive experience. And the last thing is, the starter tutorials are too technical, and we didn't always make it clear when she needed additional development to get features. In this case, it was previewing content. You need to do some technical steps before you can preview stuff, and it wasn't clear from our non-technical articles. So we did some stuff for her. One of the things, we went through our articles and just made sure the first couple of sentences started in a positive note. You can achieve something. And then we can tell them, but first you have to do this. But the important thing is to make that good first impression so that she feels slightly better when she comes to the documentation. We also created some more non-technical articles for some more technical concepts. We're still working on that, but we started, and trying to help people understand how they can support each other, how technical and non-technical people can work together. So as a summary, these are the 4 main steps that we went through so that you can remember it and hopefully get inspired and maybe go home and work on them. The first thing is you need to find out as much as possible as you can about your readers. Try to gather as much information as you can, and don't necessarily worry about categorization at first, but just get everything you can get your hands on. And then you want to try to break that data down into categories, create personas, put a face on it, make these people that you can relate to, that you can feel empathy for, you understand what they're going through, at least to some degree. I mean, you can't literally get inside their skin, but you can come close, perhaps. Then you want to go through and explore how each might experience your docs. And again, this is only might. It's not the one final solution to how everybody out there will experience your documentation, but it can really give you some insights into how things might feel from a different kind of perspective. And the last thing is to act on your insights. We created tasks in Jira, and we've closed some of them, but definitely not all of them. So I think these are the 4 most important things that worked for us, and I think it really helped us improve the documentation that we have. And I think we're going to, I don't know if it's October or November, we're going to do something similar again, because it is a process of continually improving your documentation. So I hope you will find this inspiring and maybe get inspired, so thank you. My name is Aaron. If you'd like to meet me, if you'd like to talk about this more, that's my email address, and you can contact me. I also have a sort of documented copy of this talk at collier.cz. If you are interested in looking at the pictures and so on, you can see the details there. Or you can come and talk to me, but I would say for your benefit, it would probably be best to do so after lunch so that I feel more positive and am not likely to eat you. But yes, thank you.